Welcome back to Shop Talk for Season 5. I'm Brandi.
And this is James, and we talk about all things related to mental health and cross-cultural workers.
So glad you're here. Okay, welcome back to Shop Talk, friends.
We're excited today to have Dr. Alex Galloway with us. He's a clinical psychologist providing trauma care for cross-cultural workers in high-risk areas. He founded Sentwell.org, a multidisciplinary team of therapists, spiritual directors, coaches, and trainers who focus on holistic care of cross-cultural workers. Alex has specialized interest in trauma recovery, addiction, sexuality, and the holistic care of God's people. He enjoys encouraging, equipping, and empowering those who share the good news in difficult places of the world. Glad to have you on, Alex. It's been a long time coming. We've had so many topics come through that we're like, oh, we need to talk to Alex about this, but great to
Yes.
have you.
Yeah,
Thank you. No, it's an honor to be on. Really glad to be here.
good. I think what we wanted to talk to you today, well, as James mentioned in his intro, are different aspects of care, and especially for cross-cultural workers. And I imagine sometimes with cross-cultural workers, they realize they're in a place where they're not doing great, but they don't always know where to go to first, what care would be the best for them as they're trying to move forward. So I wonder if you have some ideas about how people can know what sort of aspects of care to seek out.
Well, yeah, actually, the research shows that most people can get really good care from existing support systems, but the problem is that a lot of cross-cultural workers don't have that, and so they'll end up reaching out for more professional help. But yeah, I wish there was a way that we could get mission orgs or sending churches to actually help and assist cross-cultural workers in having good support systems that are established as they go, or and then even that they develop there on the ground wherever they're located if possible. And then that would mean they wouldn't need people like us. But sadly, things because of that, things develop. People end up going on perhaps a little further than they should without asking for help because it's not very accessible to them in these locations. And so yeah, then they'll end up calling people like us.
I think there's probably a lot of reasons that prevent people from reaching out. One is like the lack of organizational support that you kind of mentioned, whether it's having leadership that understand what their role is in caring for staff or additional levels of support. But then you hear things like staff care, which seems really broad and hard to identify, like what exactly is that? And then there's additional resources. And I wonder if you could just talk through some of what that looks like in an organization structure. Like if there was a great setup, what would it look like? And then we can talk about what additional support and care looks like.
Yeah, so with our mission org, we started out more internally and then worked more externally. So our intention was, let's see if we could get our mission org in a good place so that they didn't need our help as much, and then we could also be working for people who had more intense struggles that needed more professional help. And so a couple of things we did within our org was we set up layers of care. So the first thing though was teaching people how to care for themselves, which frankly we're not very good at. I think too, when you move cross culturally, you have this expectation that you're going to have some of the resources readily available to you that you had back in whatever your passport country, and then it's a harsh reality that you don't. And so how do I care for myself? What does it look like when I, even back to your first question, Brady, what does it look like when I'm not doing well? I mean, like I'm a clinical psychologist, but I'm actually really bad at identifying how I'm doing personally because I'm so concerned about other people. And so I needed to know that about myself. So teaching people how do you know when you need help and how do you get help for yourself personally? What do you do for yourself before you even ask for help from other people? Like going for hikes, or I need to make sure I'm exercising well, or what about my time with the Lord? What does that look like? And how do I know when it's a little out of whack? So just making sure people know the first line of defense actually is yourself. And then what's that next layer? The next layer is, well, who are the people that God has placed around you for this particular season of life that are going to speak into your life, that are going to say, Alex or James, whatever, what are you out of your mind? You can't do that. That's not good for you. Like, oh yeah, that's true. Thank you. Or people who are you're accountable to, people that you'll listen to, people who are kind of that iron sharpens iron relationship. We all need a couple of those people in our lives, but I think in this day and age with technology and mobilization, there's fewer and fewer of those. So that's another layer that we need to make sure that is embedded in people's lives. And then the next level is team. And so we try to do some work on team building, helping teams know how to navigate conflict. We serve on a team as well. James knows very well, and we've had lots of conflict, and we've got to figure out how do we cultivate healthy communication and intimacy within the team that we're on. Those people are probably the folks who you're going to turn to when things take place. Hopefully, you've got supervisors that are trained, and we've done this too. I mean, some supervisors have more gifting towards shepherding and care for people, other supervisors don't. So, how do you equip them to know, okay, well, if you're not very good at the more pastoral side, well, who is? And make sure you've got access to those people, or you're having those people help you to monitor what's going on the team. And then uh, we've had several conversations about this too, just organizational policies, like people struggling with internet pornography, men and women. And so I'll ask people, so what's the policy in your organization? And they're like, oh, they say they don't know, which is probably even worse, or they say they do know, and it's an automatic where you're sent home. Well, okay. Well, that policy is probably going to prevent people from saying, "Hey, you know what? I just slipped and I looked at something once and but I'm not going to tell anybody." And so before you know it, they're slipping a lot because they're not sharing. So policies are also important within organizations, and just also a leaning toward grace because of the high pressure these people are under in those contexts, with the acknowledgement that these people are sinful, screwed up people just like us, but they need to know, who do I go to when I'm struggling? And that needs to be okay, instead of something that's like, well, we've got a real strict policy that if you're struggling in your marriage, well, sorry, you're going to get pulled back off the field. So yeah, those are the layers that we would encourage people to make sure they've got in their own care.
You're telling me that a team of counselors, coaches, spiritual directors have to work on their own stuff too?
Oh my gosh, sometimes even worse.
Come on.
We're a
I
bunch
don't
of
think about
bleeding
that.
heart people. Like we can't run a team meeting without somebody's like, "Oh, I feel really, offended by that." It's like, and then we have to stop the meeting because we're all concerned about it because we really pay attention to people's hearts and where they're at.
And is
Lots
it
of
James all the
empathy.
time that's causing the trouble? Because that's what I'm hearing. So
Yeah, that's true.
you mentioned so many good things when you were talking about these layers of care. And every time you mention something, I was like, oh, I want to go back to that because so much of it is so foundational. It's so helpful. And I'm thinking about just this like the self-awareness of how you're doing. And so many of us lack that. And I think
Oh yeah.
that that's such a huge part, when someone comes to Scentwell or any like an intensive treatment place, I can't get my words together. That's such a big part of it is helping people understand, well, what's even going on with you, and if people could come to you with some basic understanding of what's going on inside of them, it would really help them in the process toward healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even to that point, when we run retreats, uh, or have these intensives, which maybe we'll talk about too, when people are first arriving, we don't plan to do much of anything the first day or two with them, because they've just had probably a similar experience to what James just had as he was traveling recently. It's travel itself is pretty overwhelming. It's stressful. You're in a new environment. You're trying to figure things out. If you've got kids, that's you're fighting with your wife, blah. So just to give people the opportunity to catch up to themselves before we even do anything with them. So teaching people on the front end. So actually, we want all of you here before we start doing any kind of intervention with you, and that's just going to take some time. And for different people who aren't very good at that, it takes longer, and we want to make sure and give them that time.
So once you have people there, how do you help the people you're working with kind of understand what sorts of care they would benefit from?
We do we triage them through. emails and a video call ahead of time. Would they also fill out some information, some surveys for us, so that as they're coming, we've got a pretty good idea of what it is they're struggling with and what they're hoping to get out of the time when they come to us. But I would say most of the time, maybe even 90% of the time, when they land and you actually sit face to face with them for that first meeting, which is just a get to know you and assessment meeting, it's different. Sometimes it's like, oh, I thought this was really going to be about the marriage, but wow, it seems like this guy's struggling with some addiction, but that didn't make it on the survey or in the video call that we had ahead of time. Or you sit and talk with them and realize, oh my gosh, I mean, these people I think have had something really traumatic that they're minimizing, and this guy looks really depressed. And so it's just that the power of that face-to-face initial meeting that you have with people, that we work with them to figure out what is it that they most need during this period of time. Uh, Instead of, I think we started this out initially, or at least I will say, I've made the error of assuming I know what they most need, because I'm Dr. Galloway. I've got all this expertise, and that was a real disservice to the people. And so, actually working with them to work with whatever they're able to give us, where they're coming in at that time, trying to factor all of that in, because ultimately we want to position them to experience all that God wants to do in them for that particular period of time. God's already been working in them before they came. God is going to continue to work in them after they leave us. So how do we join the Lord in what he's already been doing in these people as they come? So it's trying to align with what God's up to and position these people well with the services that we have that we can provide for them for that week or 10 days that they're here with us.
The advantage of Scentwell is that and as an associate, I can have experienced this as a practitioner, is it's highly flexible in terms of having people that are cross-trained across multiple disciplines. So you have counselors who are also trained as spiritual directors. And because of that, there's a lot of flexibility to respond to the care that's needed. But for some people who, let's say they haven't even reached out to a Scentwell yet, and they're just trying to think through, like, what help do I need? Could you talk a little bit about just the different kinds of care that are available and what they offer that might be unique? So like counseling and coaching and spiritual directing, and then we can even look more at like why the holistic model is really helpful.
Yeah, it varies so much, and I would say, just off the top of my head, I think there's probably 3 or 4 variables that we look at
Mm,
that help us answer that question. The first is, what are their expectations coming in? So most people coming to us say, I need counseling.
right.
But part of that's because that's all they know. They don't know much about spiritual direction. They've never experienced healing prayer, coaching. Oh, that's just for executives in some big organization. So that's one factor you have to think through. That might be the primary thing that they need, but I think we've seen over time that that usually isn't the main thing that they need when they're coming. The second variable is, what are their primary concerns that they have coming in? If they are like, actually, I'm really struggling with, let's say, panic attacks. Well, we're probably not going to send them right away to a coach or to a spiritual director, for example, if it's really specific like that. If they're coming in and saying, actually, I just feel really distant from the Lord. I think in other areas of my life, I'm doing pretty well, but I'm just having a hard time. My prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling. Like, okay, well, that seems like it's more particular to the discipline for them. Even in those circumstances, though, we will oftentimes supplement that with other things too, because we're complicated creatures, and I'm not just a spiritual being. I have other aspects of who I am, and even if I'm not, even if I am struggling with the Lord or I'm having panic attacks, that affects other areas of my life too, that the other disciplines can help speak into. I think the other one too is, we talk about it this way, like, how hot are they coming in? So we recently had a couple that was kicked out of their country. Really upsetting to them. Understandably, they've been there for many, many years. They're scrambling to try to figure out what to do next, and they were wanting a like term debrief. And as we talked to them, we realized actually that's probably not what you need right now, because they are still so activated that any work we did with them, like let's look back over your life, let's get a good trajectory for where the Lord might be taking you next, probably wouldn't be that helpful for them. So instead, we spent time, let's try to help you get caught up to yourself. Let's teach you some ways to calm yourself, to kind of get stabilized. And then once you're at that place, then you can begin to look ahead. But they were so overwhelmed with what had happened to them that what they really needed was more kind of crisis intervention, stabilization, instead of, oh, let's start dreaming. That didn't seem realistic. And so yeah, the third variable would be like, how are they actually coming in? Because do they need to have like a term debrief and begin to think forward for the future? Yeah, they certainly do, but the timing may not be right for how they're coming to us.
Unpack a little bit what a debriefing is, because that also gets used in a lot of
Ah,
different
yeah,
terms, a lot of
yeah,
different ways.
no. Well, yeah, you know this one really well too, James. But we actually teach. There's probably, I would say, 4 different types of debriefing, and so we do want to filter out what are the terms are. The first one is most commonly, people think about it as sort of an administrative debriefing. Like you did your work in this one place, you're going to come back, and the organization is going to glean information from you, from what you did, almost like an exit interview. But this isn't for the person. This is for the organization. We want to learn what worked well, what didn't work well. Now they might be also concerned about you, but the primary concern is we're wanting to take information from your term there for the organization. The second one is like a term debrief. So let's say I just did a 4-year stint, and I'm coming back for a home assignment, and I'd like to get just to for myself, what were the things that were helpful for me? What am I going to do next? Maybe to help me with discerning what my next season of life is going to be. It could be a term brief, could be 10 years, whatever the time frame, but it's really based on a block of time that you're designating at the front end and trying to see where was the Lord in that, as a way to begin to look forward for, yeah, what's the next leg of the journey going to be like for me or for my family or for the ministry.
And
The third one,
often shared chronologically, like as
yes,
it happened.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So they'll go through each year or whatever stages that they want to go through and process through what were the highs and lows, what were those experiences like, and those are really powerful. And I think people underestimate the power of those term debriefs that should be, I would recommend a regular thing after people are doing a certain number of years within organizations. I think we actually lose a lot of good information, both for ministry, but also for the families or the individuals, by not doing those. The third one is a crisis debrief. This is one that James and I and several others on our team are trained in. So this is a debrief that's done about a particular event. So there was an event that happened that was a crisis, something traumatic, and so that doesn't continue to haunt me or leak out into other areas of my life and ministry, I get a trauma debrief or a crisis debriefing that helps me uh, not just recover from that, but also hopefully seeing how the Lord's going to use that uh, to even redeem whatever the awful thing that happened to me is. And so that's would be the third one, is a crisis debriefing that's very different from the other two. The fourth one that we do too is like debrief an event. Like we just had a great retreat and we're all going to come together and debrief that. Or we just did this major ministry push around bringing Bibles to people who don't have them, and we're going to debrief that afterwards. And that's more strategy. That's the point of that one, is to maybe team building, but also strategy. Those are kind of the 4 different debriefings that sometimes get thrown around, but we don't know which one we're talking about.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier with the family you're talking about, sometimes debriefing is great, but sometimes you need to prioritize like what do they need? What do they need first? Is debriefing what they need
Yeah,
first? Or do they need
yeah,
a form of care first?
yeah, yeah. And what's tricky about it too is because if you got a family, you got different needs. And that's why we have just the benefit of having a larger team so that we can customize according to the needs, not just of the family as a whole, but for the individuals as well. Instead of it being just kind of like one size fits all, we've got, like James was mentioning earlier, got some flexibility so that we can help meet people where they're at when they come to us.
Some of our listeners who might be a little bit sort of nervous or apprehensive reaching out to an organization like Sentwell, just how would you encourage them about moving forward? It might be kind of scary for people, or they're a little apprehensive about going into something like if you're having an intensive and going into these times that are a little bit more intense for them. How would you, or why would you encourage them to reach out to you guys?
Yeah, I think we're also trying to be preventative and proactive, not just responsive to the crises or when people are really in a bad way. So we have retreats that are, you don't have to be just a complete mess to come to the retreat. We're actually want you to come when you're doing well, so you can be doing even better. So trying to help it be more of a normal way of like, this is like, bringing your car in to get an oil change. Like this is it's just good maintenance for you. So I think that's one way to help sort of normalize it. So it isn't just like, yeah, if I'm meeting with people that say, well, I must really be bad off. Like, no, actually, yeah, if you're meeting with some, well, it probably shows you got a lot of maturity, and that's you know how to take care of yourself, and that's healthy and it's good. So even just philosophically trying to help correct some of the beliefs that sometimes we have about asking and reaching out for help. I do think we have probably, I would say, James can help me on this, but one of the nicest, sweetest, kindest persons who is our triage person. So she is the one that is the first point of contact, which I think is just of the Lord in many ways. And she is very gracious to people when they're calling because they're in this difficult place. Like we know because they fill out just like a request for services form, so we know a little bit about it. And then she has a call with them. And this wasn't something I came up with. We had been doing triage for a long time, but I think with some of the people on my team, they realized actually this is a form of care, the way we triage people. Now, they might not even come to Scentwell, but they're going to get a good call with someone and they're going to feel ministered to by even just the way we're offering other referrals to them, by listening to them well, by normalizing what their experience is. I think that's a real, sort of an underestimated impact that we have because we've got this really sweet person on who does triage for us, who's also a spiritual director. She isn't just a triage person, but yeah, I hope to normalize people accessing places like Scentwell. There's several others like us around as being a way of like, this is this is just being healthy. This is good care. This is wise living, and it helps me enjoy the work God has called me to far more than if I were to try to do this on my own.
And it's just a good minimum way of caring for yourself when you've left perhaps all of those really close relationships. Alex talked about it being so important to have those people that can challenge you, encourage you, and call you out and bless you and affirm you when you're gone from those people. And perhaps you're in a place where you just don't have that regular kind of input in your life. You don't have a pastor that sees you and speaks into your life, or a friend, or a neighbor, or
Yeah,
a buddy
yeah,
from college that we just need this extra input. And that's really normal because we're sent to places of high risk and low access to resources. So that
yeah.
normalizing is just a really good thing to do. In fact, if you do it when you're not hot, as Alex said, but when you're getting warm, you're getting a little crispy around the edges. You're not burned out, but you're in a
That's right.
see that it's coming. That's a great time. Or when you're really healthy, to strengthen your resiliency and your resourcing, and to look at it more in terms of like your whole life, you're going to have ups and downs, and actually continuing to be healthy with the things you're good at. And this is often what coaching is for, right? Really to encourage
That's right.
using of your
Yeah,
strengths,
yeah,
of
yeah,
ways you're
yeah,
already well equipped, and then applying those to the current situation.
yeah,
Can you talk to us a little bit about the different aspects of care that like you offer at Sidwell?
yeah. I mean, I would say holistic is our primary goal. So trying to address as many aspects of who God created us to be as possible. We will often use the greatest commandments that Jesus tells us about: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, and kind of those 6 dimensions that are mentioned in that. And we actually, when people first get here, is sort of assess, where are you at on these different dimensions? How are you doing in these different areas of your life? And then based on that, we will help fashion whatever kind of care they would get. And most of the people that come through here will get touch points from these 4 different areas that James already mentioned: coaching, counseling, spiritual direction, and prayer ministry. And in that, we are working together. We let people know that we talk with each other, because we do a team approach in the care that we have. We only talk about things as it's the benefit of your care, and it benefits you if we're all talking together. And so we work together with them when they're here, coming from these different vantage points and benefiting a lot from. I've learned so much from these other disciplines that I never learned when I was in grad school, because mine's all particular to psychology. And so even like James was saying, like, the coaching has been a great help to me, as I learn far more about even just the ongoing care, the way we were helping empower them with what resources they've already got, instead of me treating them with some intervention that comes from the outside. That's a great gift. And same with healing prayer. Yeah, in fact, for me, that's the one that when I first realized how powerful doing prayer ministry with people was, with a buddy of mine. We were working with somebody. This guy had significant trauma, several, from his work on the field, and I was working with him for trauma, and we just got stuck. And I did feel like something. I mean, like something was off, not psychologically, but even spiritually, like even when I was with this guy. So I asked my friend, hey, would you mind doing some prayer stuff with him? He's like, oh, yeah, I'd be glad to. So he did. I sat in with him, introduced him. Like 30 minutes, they did this healing prayer session together. And this guy was like profoundly impacted by this healing prayer. And it like, we did probably in 30 minutes what would have probably taken us, I don't know, 6 or 7 sessions. Like, it was unbelievable what God had done in this guy's life in just a 30-minute session. I was like, this just doesn't seem fair. It feels like this guy's cheating. Like, I went and got my doctorate and all this psychology stuff, and 30 minutes, you do a little prayer stuff with this guy, and all of a sudden he's like so much better. Like, what is that about? So I think having a high regard for how the Lord works through multiple disciplines, because we're just complicated creatures, right? And so if we think everything is going to get better with psychology, whoa, we're doing all of our clients a real disservice. There are things that we can do that and do those well, and it's needed for sure. We definitely need psychology for sure, but we can underestimate the power of the other disciplines by just poo-pooing them, instead of actually saying, we need the body of Christ. We don't need just ourselves. We need multiple entry points to help people access the healing that God offers to these people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think even for people who are looking initially for help, just to recognize that sometimes we actually do need to lean into multiple parts of who we are at the same time. I wonder, Alex, if you could
Yeah,
just walk through those. You mentioned those different dimensions from the greatest commandment. Could you just walk through your spotlight exercise and in brief, and just somebody could even do their own self-assessment while listening?
yeah. So we use that verse, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbors yourself. And out of that, we pull kind of 6 different dimensions of at least what the Bible talks about who we are. And you can't really get into the original text or Greek, because even in different cultures that we kind of break people up differently, but at least it gives sort of a good sort of shotgun approach of like, this is the things we want to assess about who a person is. So the first one is love the Lord your God. So we're going to ask about, what's your relationship with the Lord like? What is your spiritual life like? How fulfilled do you feel spiritually? What's your prayer life? What are your spiritual disciplines? So love the Lord your God. with all your heart, then we would ask about emotions, like how are you feeling? What's going on in your heart? Are you, and people will say, well, I feel depressed. It's usually, we have lots of feelings, and usually it's not just one. So I feel depressed, but I'm also excited about this next season of ministry, but I'm upset that I don't feel as excited as I should. So there's this mixture of emotions. So trying to draw out how they're really feeling at the time. Love the Lord God, your heart, soul. We talk about in terms of your desires, your longings. How fulfilled do you feel in this role that you're in? What are some of your deep longings? Is there some barriers or some frustrations that you're feeling for some goals that maybe you have in ministry or in your life personally? So that's the soul. Love the Lord God with our heart, soul. Mind is mentally. What's taking up much of your thought life? What are some things that you're thinking about that you wish you weren't thinking about? Is thinking keeping you up at night? Or what's the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning? Are you having trouble concentrating? Trouble maybe forgetful? So it's evaluating and asking questions related to mentally. With all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. We talk about your body. So physically, how are you doing physically? Are you getting exercise, diet? Are you on medications? Uh, are you struggling? I just feel fatigued and I'm tired all the time. It's those kind of things that we're asking about. A lot of workers carry this low grade anxiety because they don't have good health care wherever they are. So it's like, you know what, I probably got this thing in my mouth. I don't know what it is, and I'm a little anxious about it, that we might just not feel that anxious about because we have easy access to a doctor in case this did become an abscess or something. But instead, I'm carrying for months this sort of stress around this could be bad, and that means I got to fly over to so and so, and where am I going to get the medical care? So, even things like that, particular to workers, we also want to not overlook some of the maybe physical concerns that they might have. And the last one is love your neighbor as yourself. So we want to ask about their relationships, their social support system. Do they feel well cared for? Do they feel seen? Even like James was saying earlier, are they feeling this kind of connection with others relationally, feeling accountability, feeling blessed? People can bless them and challenge them. That's really important. So those are the different dimensions that we evaluate when people come, and it's what we want to evaluate before they go to, hoping that they're feeling more fulfilled in those areas, or at least have a good plan for how they can feel more fulfilled in those areas.
I love this, Alex, because I mean, we are such holistic people. And I think it also would help people break down, like, often we get to these points where we know we're not doing well, but we don't know how to express it. And it
Right.
often is more than one aspect of our lives. And it just feels like this jumbled mess inside of us. And so helping people break down what's going on in different areas, I think is so clarifying and freeing too. And you can kind of, whenever you can see it and name it, it doesn't maybe feel as big.
Yeah, and as James was talking about, we talk about it in terms of like a spotlight. So we actually do it like as a prayer time. So we have people just kind of sit quietly and say, I want you just to imagine the Lord putting a spotlight on these different aspects of who you are. And then we take a little quiet little time. So it's not just them coming up with it themselves. We're asking the Holy Spirit to sort of highlight these particular areas in them. And it helps them be take the time even to be a little bit more honest with themselves than they might be otherwise.
When you mentioned, breaking down different aspects, you mentioned the physical part. When we lived in Central Asia, our healthcare was not great. And one thing we would all joke about is like there was one doctor who would medevac you, and we're all like, let's go to that doctor, let's get out of here. And, but also, our son is disabled, and at that point, he was doing okay, but it took such a toll on me that I didn't completely recognize at the time of wondering about his health
Yeah,
and safety
yeah,
and
sure.
not knowing if something happened, what was going to happen there and how are we going to take care of it. And so, like, helping people
Yeah,
recognize
right.
that is huge.
Yeah. That we just don't have reason to think about when we have access to resources all around us, you sometimes in our home countries, wherever we're coming from.
I met with somebody based in our org based in India, and she was just sharing about the impact of the pollution and the air quality that people don't always account for. So, people have a headache, 90% of their life, which impacts their decision making and
Yeah,
thinking and
yeah.
concentration. And they're not sleeping well
Right,
because,
right,
your
right.
oxygen is so poor, and there's other parts of the environment that contribute to that too. And sometimes
Yeah.
getting out helps in a lot of ways because it gets you out of that environment for a little bit. So, Alex, why don't you talk a little bit about what an intensive is when somebody comes for kind of a more care in a short period of time? What does that look like, and how does somebody know that's a good thing for them to do?
Yeah, I think it's one of our favorite things that we do. So we get maybe it can be an individual, a couple, or a family. They'll come. We actually have housing for them at a facility here where they can stay, so we can control the hospitality. But they'll come for anywhere between 5 to 10 days. We prefer 10 days, and most of the time when people are doing 5, they'll say, "I wish we had longer." So uh,
Always.
we encourage people toward that, but it is difficult because often when workers are leaving their their ministry, nothing happens and maybe even goes backwards. So they're
Mm.
anxious to leave the field for ministry purposes. So trying to coax them out for longer can sometimes be challenging. But when they land here, like I said earlier, we'll give them some time to catch up to themselves. We orient them to the area. We ask them how do they care for themselves, and with things that sometimes we don't think about, like exercise or going for a walk or getting a good meal. Just providing more hospitality as a way of helping to stabilize them and get them set for what the Lord's going to do for them for the week. And then we set them up with this initial meeting where we talk about what's really going on and how we can help them and orient them for the time that we have them. And then they'll have probably 1 or 2 meetings every day with one of us, uh, different people from different disciplines on our team. So we usually have maybe 4 or 5 people. That's the care team for those families or individuals or couples as they come through here. And we have an ongoing dialogue with all of us, like, oh, I think this is what's going on. Yeah, this is what I saw. I'm thinking about doing this with them. You think that would be helpful? Yeah, that would be great. Let's do that. We're we're wanting for the services that we provide for them, though, to not be the high points. We're actually trying to help facilitate experiences that they have with one another or alone, with themselves or with the Lord, that 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 they can take with them, that really impact them, that they carry with them, because they're not taking us with them when they go, but they are taking the Lord and they're taking themselves or their families with them. And so if we can help them discover how do I have these healing experiences that are within a context that's quiet, that helps facilitate that I can then also take with me and have other places. So it's an ongoing care that we hope to be able to steward, not just well, I just had this amazing experience with James. He told me everything I needed to know, and now I'm all better. Like, we're not really looking for. Now James might do that from time to time, but that's not really what we're looking for. We're more interested in helping people learn how to care for themselves for the long haul. And so we'll teach them. We provide opportunities for them. We try to get them realigned with those different dimensions that we talk about, and then sort of hopefully send them on the way so that they're continuing in the work of healing. And we find that's best done from using this interdisciplinary approach that we have with people.
Do you want to just mention? I mean, Sitwell is located in Malaga, Spain, and there's some other places and that also provide kind of a more intensive model. And in my experience, they're all collaborative. We're not in competition because it's not like we're running out of opportunities to care for people. So, do you want to mention some of the other ones and what might be similar,
Yeah, yeah.
different?
Yeah, I mean, we actually just, was it yesterday? Yeah, I was on a call with um, 8 or 9 of us. We have a collaborative group that we meet with all of the directors from each of these different institutions that are providing similar care. So all of us are providing care for cross-cultural workers. Some are co-located, you could say that, or located outside of North America um, or UK. Some are in those locations as well. But the primary focus is we want to help cross-cultural workers, and many of them are specifically counseling centers. So it's not necessarily holistic. Others have both counselors and spiritual directors. Others may even be more similar to us in this more holistic approach. But yeah, so you have the Well, Cornerstone, Tumaini, alongside Link Care. Now I'm going to feel bad for the ones
Olive
that I'm
Tree.
forgetting. Olive Tree, thank you.
Sorry, is Olive Tree still known as Olive Tree now that they're in
Mhm.
Hungary?
Yep.
Yeah, they are. And the other one
Ministry
is
Essentials,
thank you, Ministry Essentials. Um,
Australia,
yeah,
the Red
we've
Sea.
got yeah,
Forgive us
yeah,
if we have forgotten any, but they're
yeah. That's true.
they are
Yeah, listeners
around.
out there going, they
Yeah.
didn't mention
Yeah, what the heck?
us.
Yeah,
This has been so, I think, helpful and informative, and I really hope that our listeners can hear this and be sort of excited about the different aspects of care that are out there. And I would encourage them to pursue, like you mentioned, or one of you mentioned, like a car with a tune-up,
Mhm.
just, if you're not in a crisis situation, that's fantastic, but also you can lean into these areas of care and build up your resilience and your margin for those times when it does get harder, because it does get harder.
yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah,
I
so
mean, because the truth is too, like the evil one wants to take every one of these messengers of God out. So even when you're doing well, I mean, Jesus in his last words to all of us, his disciples or the apostles, are like, basically, it's going to be hell out there. Just
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm with you,
and I'm with
and it's
you.
all going to be okay in the end.
Hmm.
But it's going to be hell out there.
Hmm.
So I think we need to make sure our workers are like, yeah, it is going to be like that. It shouldn't surprise me. So even when things are going okay, it might be a good idea to just stop in for a tune-up, or like you said, or get the oil change, and so that I'm really operating at my optimum in the work that God's called me to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for this, Alex. Do you have any other questions, James?
Let's say any other resources you'd recommend for somebody looking for care?
Uh, yeah, yeah. So for me, I'm saddened by the fact that the majority of workers out there, when they're not doing well, the first thing they do is go to Dr. Google.
Mm.
Uh, and I think James and I have talked about this too, right? So all of us, these different orgs, we've got our little resources that we've got online or something, most of which don't get access because that isn't what Google is going to pop up. Sometimes it's not even accessible to Google. Um, so yeah, I would love a central location that has curated resources for cross-cultural workers. Um, I mean, I've got some of my favorite books, some of which I've learned from some of our colleagues at Sentwell and from some of my colleagues from those other counseling centers and care providers for cross-cultural workers. But yeah, I've got a long list. I wish it wasn't as hard to find. Uh, I wish we could come up with a way to get all of our lists out there but that's the first thing that people can turn to when they are struggling instead of, whatever Google curates for the cross-cultural workers.
We'll definitely share the Scentwell website, which has some good resources on it. It's got a few different lists. It even has good resources available in Spanish, which is
Oh,
at least a helpful starting place.
thank you for this time, Alex. I feel like I could go off on so many rabbit trails with things that you've mentioned throughout this conversation, but I feel like this has been really good.
Yeah, no, I've been talking to James about getting on this podcast for a long time. Finally, glad to get on it. Hopefully, it's not my last time. You'll invite me back again. But
Oh, I
yeah,
hope
it's
so.
great
Yeah.
talking to you guys. Thank you,
And
James and Brandi.
special to have Alex on as one of the couples because Amy was on a few years ago. So
Oh yeah,
That's
that's
now
right.
we've gotten both Galloways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now you have to get Karis on, one of my daughters.
That's right. Talk
I'm
about
also
writing.
interested in.
All right. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
Alex.
yeah, you bet. Blessings on you guys.
Bye.
what would you encourage them to do, or how? What? Dang, I can't get my words together. Can we
Talk a little bit. Yeah, I think Brandy was saying the
We're
same
doing
thing.
really
Go
good
ahead,
with this
Brandy.
today.
This is why we edit.
You're okay?
Yeah.
Did they actually have air traffic controllers in Newark?
Just one, and I think he was running behind.
Okay.